This is a story about a man who had nothing, absolutely nothing, but discovered something that transformed his entire existence. By the end of this story, you will understand how a simple shift in thinking can unlock doors you never knew existed. But that's not all. As we journey through this incredible tale, we will also explore the powerful lessons hidden within each moment. This will help us understand how our minds shape our reality in ways we never imagined. So stay with us until the very end. Once upon a time, in a bustling city filled with towering buildings and busy streets, there lived a man named Samuel. He was 42 years old, and for the past 15 years, he had been living on the streets. Every morning, Samuel would sit at the same corner near the central market, holding a small cardboard sign that read, "Please help, God bless." His clothes were torn and dirty, his hair was long and messy, and his face showed the weight of years filled with struggle and disappointment. Samuel's daily routine never changed. He would wake up before sunrise in the small alley where he slept, walk to his usual spot, and spend the entire day asking strangers for spare change. Most people walked past him without even looking. Some would drop a coin or two into his cup, but many others would cross the street to avoid him completely. By the end of each day, Samuel barely had enough money to buy a simple meal from the nearby food cart. What made Samuel's situation even more difficult was his mindset. He believed that the world was against him. He thought that rich people were selfish and cruel. He was convinced that society had forgotten about people like him. Every rejection, every person who ignored him, every day that passed without hope, only strengthened his belief that nothing would ever change. Samuel had created a prison in his mind, and he didn't even realize he was the one holding the keys. One rainy morning, something unusual happened. As Samuel sat in his regular spot, soaking wet and shivering from the cold, an elderly woman approached him. She was well dressed, but walked with a simple wooden cane. Her eyes were kind, and she had a gentle smile on her face. Instead of dropping coins into his cup, she sat down on the wet pavement right next to him. Samuel looked at her with surprise and said, "Ma'am, you shouldn't sit here. The ground is dirty and wet. You'll ruin your nice clothes." The elderly woman smiled warmly and replied, "Don't worry about my clothes, dear. I'm more interested in talking with you. What's your name?" Samuel hesitated for a moment, then answered, "My name is Samuel, but most people just call me the beggar on 5th Street." The woman nodded thoughtfully and said, "Well, Samuel, my name is Margaret. I've been watching you sit here every day for the past month. I walk this way to visit my daughter, and I see you here rain or shine. Tell me, what do you think about during all those hours you sit here?" Samuel was confused by the question. Nobody had ever asked him what he thought about. He replied, "I don't know. I guess I think about how unfair life is. I think about all the people who have more than they need while I have nothing. I wonder why God has forgotten about me." Margaret listened carefully to every word. Then she asked another question that surprised Samuel even more. "Samuel, do you believe that your thoughts might be creating your reality?" Samuel laughed bitterly and said, "Lady, my thoughts don't create anything. Look at me. If my thoughts had any power, don't you think I would be living in a mansion somewhere instead of begging on the street?" Margaret smiled patiently and said, "Samuel, I want to tell you something important. 25 years ago, I was exactly where you are now. I was homeless, hopeless, and convinced that the world owed me something. I spent every day feeling angry and sorry for myself. But one day, someone asked me the same question I just asked you. That question changed everything." Samuel stared at her in disbelief. This well-dressed, confident woman had once been homeless. It seemed impossible. Margaret continued, The person who helped me explained something that I want to share with you. Our minds are like gardens. Whatever we plant and water will grow. If we plant seeds of anger, bitterness, and hopelessness, that's exactly what will flourish in our lives. But if we choose to plant different seeds, we can grow something completely different. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small notebook and pen. Samuel, I want you to try something for the next 7 days. Instead of focusing on everything that's wrong with your life, I want you to write down 3 things you're grateful for every morning. They don't have to be big things. Maybe you're grateful for the sunrise, or for the food cart owner who treats you kindly, or for the fact that you woke up healthy this morning. Samuel looked at the notebook skeptically. How is writing in a book going to change anything? I'll still be sitting here tomorrow, and I'll still be poor. Margaret stood up slowly, brushing the water off her coat. Samuel, you're absolutely right. Writing in this notebook won't magically make money appear in your cup, but it might change something much more powerful. It might change how you see the world around you. And when you change how you see the world begins to change how it responds to you. Before leaving, Margaret said one more thing that would echo in Samuel's mind for days to come. Samuel, you told me that God has forgotten about you. But what if God has been sending you opportunities every single day, and you've been too focused on your problems to notice them? What if the very person who could change your life walked past you yesterday, but you were looking down at the ground instead of making eye contact? As Margaret walked away, Samuel sat there holding the notebook, feeling more confused than ever. Part of him wanted to throw it in the trash and forget about this strange conversation. But another part of him, a part that had been silent for years, whispered that maybe, just maybe, this woman knew something he didn't. That night, as Samuel lay in his usual sleeping spot in the alley, he couldn't stop thinking about Margaret's words. For the first time in years, he began to question whether his thoughts and beliefs might actually be affecting his circumstances. Could it be possible that his mindset was keeping him trapped in a life of poverty and desperation? The next morning, Samuel woke up earlier than usual. The notebook was still clutched in his hand from the night before. He stared at the blank pages and remembered Margaret's challenge. 3 things to be grateful for every day. It sounded ridiculous, but something inside him urged him to try. Samuel picked up the pen and wrote his first entry. Day 1. I am grateful for the warm bread the bakery owner gave me yesterday evening. He paused, thinking harder. I am grateful that it didn't rain as hard today as it did yesterday. Another pause. This was more difficult than he expected. Finally, he wrote, I am grateful that I can still walk and that my body is healthy enough to survive on these streets. As he wrote those words, Samuel noticed something strange. For just a moment, instead of feeling sorry for himself, he felt a tiny spark of appreciation. It was so small that he almost missed it, but it was there. He closed the notebook and walked to his usual corner, but something felt different about this morning. When Samuel reached his spot, he decided to try something new. Instead of staring at the ground with his hand extended, he looked up at the faces of people passing by. He made eye contact and said, "Good morning," to several strangers. Most of them still ignored him, but a few people actually nodded back. One woman even smiled and said, "Good morning," in return before continuing on her way. By the end of that first day, Samuel had collected the same amount of money as usual, but he felt somehow lighter. That evening, he wrote in the notebook again. Day 2. I am grateful for the woman who smiled at me this morning. I am grateful for the sunshine that kept me warm for most of the day. I am grateful for the strength to continue trying. On the third day, something remarkable happened. Samuel was sitting in his usual spot when a businessman stopped in front of him. Instead of dropping coins and walking away, the man actually spoke to him. "Excuse me, I've noticed you here before. You seem different today, more present somehow. What's your story?" Samuel was shocked. Nobody had ever asked about his story before. He found himself telling this stranger about his 15 years on the streets, but instead of complaining about his bad luck, he focused on the small moments of kindness he had experienced. The businessman listened with genuine interest and said, "You know, I own a small restaurant a few blocks from here. We need someone to help with cleaning and simple tasks. The pay isn't much, but it includes 1 meal per day. Would you be interested?" Samuel could barely believe what he was hearing. After years of rejection, someone was offering him actual work. He accepted immediately, and the businessman gave him directions to come by the next morning. That night, Samuel's gratitude entry was longer than ever before. He wrote about the job opportunity, about feeling hopeful for the first time in years, and about beginning to believe that maybe the world wasn't entirely against him. The job at the restaurant started small. Samuel swept floors, washed dishes, and cleaned tables. But he approached every task with enthusiasm and gratitude. The restaurant owner, whose name was David, noticed Samuel's positive attitude and strong work ethic. Within a few weeks, David began teaching Samuel how to prepare simple dishes and handle customer orders. Samuel continued writing in his notebook every single day. As the weeks passed, his entries became more and more positive. He was grateful for learning new skills, for having a roof over his head during work hours, for the friendships he was building with other employees, and for the steady income that allowed him to rent a small room in a nearby boarding house. But the most important change was happening inside Samuel's mind. He began to see opportunities everywhere. When customers complained about slow service, instead of getting defensive, Samuel saw it as a chance to improve. When David mentioned that the restaurant needed better organization, Samuel volunteered to create systems that would help everything run more smoothly. 6 months after meeting Margaret, Samuel's life looked completely different. He was no longer living on the streets. He had become David's assistant manager and was earning enough money to afford better clothes and proper meals. But more importantly, his entire perspective on life had transformed. One morning, Samuel was walking to work when he saw Margaret sitting on a bench in the park. He approached her with a huge smile and said, "Margaret, do you remember me? I'm Samuel, the man you met on 5th Street." Margaret looked up and her face lit up with recognition. "Of course I remember you, but you look so different. What happened?" Samuel sat down next to her and pulled out the notebook she had given him months earlier. It was now completely filled with daily gratitude entries. "Margaret, you were right about everything. My thoughts really were creating my reality. When I started focusing on what I was grateful for instead of what I was missing, everything began to change. Opportunities appeared that had probably been there all along, but I was too blind to see them." Margaret smiled warmly and said, "Samuel, you did all the hard work yourself. I just planted a small seed. You chose to water it every single day." Samuel shook his head and replied, "No, Margaret, you gave me something much more valuable than money or food. You gave me hope and taught me that I had the power to change my circumstances by changing my thoughts." As they talked, Samuel realized that his transformation hadn't happened overnight. It was the result of small daily choices to focus on gratitude instead of complaints, to look for opportunities instead of obstacles, and to believe in possibilities instead of limitations. The beggar who once sat on 5th Street had discovered the most powerful truth of all. Our external circumstances are often a reflection of our internal state of mind. Samuel's story teaches us one of the most powerful lessons we can ever learn. When we change our mindset, we don't just change how we see the world, we change how the world responds to us. Samuel spent 15 years believing that life was against him, and that belief kept him trapped in poverty and desperation. But the moment he started planting different seeds in the garden of his mind, everything began to shift. The truth is, we all have the power to transform our circumstances by transforming our thoughts. Like Samuel, many of us are sitting in our own version of Fifth Street, focused on everything that's wrong instead of looking for the opportunities that surround us every single day. We create prisons in our minds without even realizing we hold the keys to our own freedom. Remember, your thoughts are creating your reality right now. If you plant seeds of gratitude, hope, and possibility, that's exactly what will grow in your life. But if you continue to water the weeds of negativity and self-pity, those weeds will choke out every opportunity that comes your way. Start today. Find 3 things to be grateful for. Look up instead of down, and watch as the world begins to change around you. Because when you change your mindset, your entire life will follow. Thank you for joining me on Samuel's journey, and remember to keep growing those seeds of possibility in your own life. Thank you for watching. If this story inspired you, please share it with someone who needs to hear this. Consider subscribing and leaving a like on this video for more stories that can transform your perspective on life. I'll see you soon again in the next story. Cheers.